When watching a favourite film for the first time, there's a moment, and I'm sure a number of you have felt it before, when you suddenly realise what you're dealing with. You suddenly know you love this movie. I remember feeling this moment the first time I saw the adaptation of The Prisoner of Azkaban during the scene where Harry runs away from the Dursleys after an unfortunate ballooning accident of sorts. I remember thinking, oh, this is different, this is a step up, but I didn't exactly know why at the time. I was like 10. Now, though, I chalk it up to being because of something the director and the crew behind the film executed exceptionally well, the cinematic adaptation. The film's director, Alfonso Cuarón, has always put a strong emphasis on cinematography, working extremely closely with the page-to-film process, from screenwriting to storyboarding to shooting. If you look at any of his work previous or since, you'll know what I mean. Cuarón worked closely with his cinematographer Michael Saracen to ensure that every shot of Prisoner has a purpose, and the immediacy of his camera work goes hand in hand with the film's propulsive pace and purposeful editing. Gone was the clunky yet faithful direction of Chris Columbus, who helmed the former two films. We'll get back to him in a moment. But what makes the film the genre-defining, highly praised bar raiser that it is how Cuarón uses these elements to adapt a novel in the most artistically satisfying way he knows how. In film theory, there is a constant debate that centers around this idea of fidelity. Fidelity discourse discusses how faithful and close to its source material a cinematic adaptation should be. 60 years ago, a guy called George Bluestone, a pioneer in the field of film literature, published an essential argument of fidelity discourse in his book, Novels into Film. He warned against thinking that the novel is a norm and the film deviates at its peril. He argued that changes are inevitable the moment one abandons the linguistic of visual medium. Bluestone loathed critics that implied that cinema had somehow done a disservice to literature because they were talking about two completely different beasts. Thankfully, since Bluestone's book, critics have managed to identify this inherent difference. For the most part, a film's reception is now just as much about the liberties taken with the book as the faithfulness. See Fellowship of the Ring, Zodiac, I could go on. Until this guy, Chris Columbus. Remember him? Personally, I wouldn't speak negatively of the first Harry Potter film. Philosopher's Stone had charm, the bright palette of the reds and golds, a bouncy whirlwind pace, and the general golly-gee factor that the first novel inspired in the hearts of its readers. Yet some critics noted that despite its commercial success, Columbus's commitment to its source material had failed to utilize the medium in cinematically satisfying ways. It even failed to satisfy some book readers. Kansas State literature professor Philip Nell said that watching Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is like watching a historical reenactment. That is to say, the film is constructed as a faithful copy, and therefore does not provoke the same response the original inspired. The release of, and contrast between the Fellowship of the Ring shortly after, did not really help matters. Which brings us back to Cuarón. These two arguments, Bluestone and Nell, are central in understanding why The Prisoner of Azkaban sets itself apart, both in critics' and fans' eyes. Take these 4 short Whomping Willow scenes. Cuarón and Saracen use these scenes to break up the action, a transition technique both for editor and audience. These scenes denote a seasonal change from autumn through to summer, acting as both a pacing and narrative device. Speaking of narrative devices, it also tells us that, like in the novel, the Whomping Willow has been relocated from its location in Chamber of Secrets. Additionally, it sets up the Whomping Willow as a recurring character, or rather a recurring plot object, and offers a great impression of the set piece to come later in the film. In less than 90 seconds of total runtime, Cuarón manages to cinematically convey what J.K. Rowling has done in a cumulative few pages. This is cinematic adaptation done right, and it's only one example of the ways in which Cuarón's approach sets itself above the rest. There's so much more I could say about Cuarón's cinematic choices. I could gush about Cuarón's attention to detail in excellent sound design. For instance, the beginning of the film, as Harry is casting the Lumos spell, a dog can be heard in the background, very faintly. This denotes a warning from Sirius, as Harry is risking expulsion with this spell. Or as Wormtail walks by Harry in the hallways of Hogwarts. If you listen real close, you can hear the scuttling of the rat Pettigrew. I mentioned before also the purposeful cinematography of Michael Saracen that manages to bring so much of Hogwarts to life from page to film with beautiful sustained shots, often lasting over 10 seconds without a single cut. Prisoner is an adaptation that sacrifices little and gives so much more. It respectfully departs its source material not in what story is told, but how the story is told. J.K. Rowling's and Cuarón's respective works are individually fantastic because they celebrate their respective mediums. If a book and a film are both done well, the book should be the book fan's favourite way of telling the story, the film should be the film fan's favourite way, and they should both complement each other by drawing attention to the difference in their mediums. We live in an era where young adult adaptations will only continue to be churned out, trying to be the next box office smashing film franchise. The largest show on the planet right now, Game of Thrones, is a swimming petri dish of Fidelity discourse, and the ever-original Hollywood has never been more reliant on new, original, dense stories that can only come from literature. Like Cuarón, a filmmaker should attempt to ensure that their version can only come from film.
Well done, Harry. Well done.